So recently, I've been working on a logo redesign with my good friend Martin Perhiniak from Yes, I'm a Designer, a channel you should definitely check out if you're into graphic design. And we've redesigned the company logo to go from this to this. Obviously, this was done in Illustrator, but I then had an idea of creating a transformation animation, a kind of a morph animation in Cinema 4D, going from the old version to the new one, and I created this. Now, this was a bit of a tricky one as I had to use Illustrator files as reference and convert them to Vertex Maps in Cinema 4D, and then combine those Vertex Maps with fields to create this morph animation. In this tutorial, that's what we're going to learn. So here we are in Illustrator with the two logos, and I want to morph this old one into the new one. And in order to do that, I'm actually going to go and first simplify things a little bit. I don't really care too much about the text for now, so I'm going to go and delete the text. Let's say there, and also delete this as well. I'll get rid of this as well, just for simplicity's sake. And I now want to transition this old one, the green one, into this blue one in 3D. So for that, I'm going to create two new documents. So Command N for a new document. Let's say 800 by 800. And I'm going to take the first logo here, copy and paste it here. And take the second one, copy that, create a new document, and paste it here as well. I'll make these a little large. Let's say there, and also here. Just to make sure they're roughly the same size, I'm going to copy this here, paste it over here, and it looks about right, maybe slightly smaller. Say there, then cut it, and then delete this and paste instead. So they're roughly about the same size. I'm going to save this one as my old logo. So let me just go and save this. I'll call this one old, like that. And I'll go and save this other one as the new logo. I'm saving both as Illustrator files. I'll then switch over to Cinema. And let me first import them. So I'm going to go to File, Merge Project, and I'll pick the old one first, bring that in. I'll leave the settings as they are. That's the old logo. I'll also bring the new one in, File, Merge again, and I'll bring the new logo, like that. Same settings as before. So I now have, if I zoom in, I now have the two logos here from Illustrator in Cinema. And I actually want the spline data from this. So what I'm going to do is to go and highlight this, the new one. In fact, let me go and hide this new one. Take the old one, and I'll make this editable by pressing C. And inside of this null now, we should have the spline that makes up this outline. So I'm going to take the spline out, and I'll delete this old logo null. I'll do the same for the new one. I'll hide the old spline. Let me just rename this to be old. And the new one, I'll enable this, make this editable. And this should give us the splines as well. Since this has three different shapes, you see we'll have three different extrude objects, and each one has its own spline inside. I'm going to take them out, like that. Delete this null. Take the three splines, and then if I right-click, I can connect and delete these objects. So I now have a single spline. Let me go and rename this to be new. And now I have the old spline, which is that one, and the new one, which is this one. You'll also notice that the axis here isn't in the center. That's a quick fix. I can highlight both of these, go to Tools, Axis, and we can say Center Axis to, and the axis points here will go to the center of the objects. I can then go to Coordinates, and then I'm just going to make sure that these are in the center by zeroing these out by right-clicking, and right-clicking on all three axes. So now the logos are centered. So those are the two reference logos or the reference splines we'll be using, and we'll transition from the old one into the new one. And I want this transition to be applied to a plane where the plane is embossed or debossed depending on the settings that you'll be using, so that the old logo is applied to the plane and then that transforms or translates into the new one. So for that, I'm going to go and create a plane. I'll get the plane to sit right up, so I'm going to go to the Object tab and then set that to be Z. If I zoom out, you see the plane is huge compared to the two icons here. So I'm going to make the icons bigger as well by selecting them and then pressing T for my scale tool. And then I'll just scale these up let's say about that size. And I want to have more segments on the plane as well, because we'll eventually be distorting or displacing the segments. So if I go and press NB, I can see the number of segments I have here. That's 10 by 10 by default. I'm going to go and increase this to, let's say, 100 by 100. That should give us enough to start with. I'll then go and make the plane editable so I can apply a vertex map to it. I'll do that by pressing C simply. And with the plane highlighted, if I switch back to my points mode here, I can now go and set an empty vertex map on this plane. To do that, I'm going to go to Select and Set Vertex Weight. I'll press OK. And now this creates a red vertex map, which means nothing is highlighted. So the value is set to 0, that's why it's all red. Had I, let me just undo this, had I selected this option here, and then went back to 100% value, this would make the vertex map yellow, and as you probably figured out, yellow means 100% selected, and red means 0% selected. So let me undo this, and I'll go back to Select, Set Vertex Weight, and set that to 0%, so it's all red, so nothing's highlighted, nothing's selected. And what I want to do now is to control this vertex map with these splines. So I'm going to select the map, and in order to do that, I'm going to need to turn the splines into fields. And in order to use the splines as fields on the vertex map, we need to click on this option here where it says Use Fields. And this will add the Fields tab here. And this also adds this freeze layer, which basically records the state of this vertex map right now. And I don't really need this state, so I'm going to go and select it and then delete. Instead, I'm going to drop my old spline in here, and that becomes my first vertex map applied to the plane. Now, as you can see, if I zoom out, this doesn't quite work. Just for now, I'm going to turn off the new one. So the logo we have, let me just pull this old one out a little bit so we can actually see what's going on. So this logo that we have here is kind of projected onto this, but not quite. That's because this logo is trying to wrap itself around this plane in a circular or a radial pattern, and it doesn't quite work. If I select the vertex map, come down to the spline here, let me just move this up. You can see the spline shape is set to curve, but instead of curve, I'm going to use a mask spline. And what that does is it uses the spline, projects it onto the surface of the plane along the z-axis, that's what this one here is, and using this distance value, it softens the edges of this. If I lower the distance down, you see it's a sharper spline, so these are quite accurate. As I increase this, it softens it, almost like adding feather to a brush in, say, Photoshop. Let's say that's enough. By the way, this will depend on the number of segments you have on the surface as well. So if I zoom in here, you can see this is not quite perfect. But if I add more segments to the plane, I can do this easily by selecting the plane. And then if I go and press US, that will just double the number of segments. So now that we have a higher resolution plane, the vertex map is going to be more accurate. I'm going to soften this a little more, let's say by 7 centimeters maybe. That looks about right. And what I want to do now is to turn or translate this vertex map over to the new version. For that, I'm going to first enable the new one. I can move this out the way as well, so if I select it, I can push this out this way. It doesn't really matter where these are, because these will always be projected along the z-axis. So this could be anywhere along the z-axis here. I'll then go to the vertex map, and as I drop the new one over the old one, you see this overrides it. Again, we had the same issue with the curve. So I'm going to select the new one here, change its shape from curve to mask, and now this is being projected onto the plane. And here, whichever spline is on top, will be visible first. So if I push this old one here, that's what I'm seeing. If I push the new one, that's what I get. Now I want the new one not to be as soft, so I'm going to go to the old one to check. So this was 7. I'm going to make the new one also 7 on the distance. So it's not as soft. And now we need to find a way of transitioning from the old one to the new one. You see here, where you have the opacity sliders, I can actually go and tweak this. You see this kind of fades the top one in gradually. But I want to create something a little more organic. And for that, I'm going to mask in the new spline. So to the spline, the new one, I can add a mask by clicking on this button. And masks in fields in Cinema 4D are very similar to masks anywhere else, say Photoshop or Illustrator or After Effects. They allow you to show or hide parts of the objects, in this case, parts of this new spline as a vertex map. Hey, it's me! Are you finding this video helpful? If you are, please subscribe to our channel so you can get more content like this. And I'll give you another reason why that's a good idea at the end of the video. For now, let's continue. So the mask is added and it's empty now, but we need to go and find a way of revealing this object with this mask. Well, I can do that by using yet another field. So let's say I wanted this to be revealed from left to right. Well, I can go and add a linear field here. And this field gets added just like any other field, like the splines we had here. But I want this field to be used as part of this mask. So I'm going to drop this inside the mask. And what the field does as I move this left and right, let me just go and first actually get rid of these outlines. So I'm going to go and make the old one here invisible and the new one invisible so they don't get in the way. And this linear field now controls the transition of this new one. So let's go and select this vertex map first. If this linear field is on the left, it shows the entire object. If it's on the right, it hides that entire object. So the new spline here, the new logo, is being revealed with this linear field. The softening here, or the feather, is controlled with the distance or the fall off of this linear field. If I move this out, it'll be easier to see. You see the linear field has a yellow dot here and a yellow dot here. The longer the distance between these two, the softer the transition is going to be. If I make this shorter, it's now going to be a sharper transition, like that. Now all I'm going to do now is to animate this linear field to go from left to right. But the problem here is that we are starting with the new logo visible. I actually want the logo to be invisible initially. Well, that's an easy fix. I can go to the linear field's direction, change it from positive x to negative x, and now whatever is on the right hand side of the linear field as far as the new spline here is concerned is going to be invisible, and everything to the left of this linear field will be visible. So as I move the linear field from here to here, since these are now on the left hand side, they become visible. As I move it back, they become invisible. So all I'm going to do now is to animate the linear field to go from left to right. For that, I'll go and select the linear field, go to coordinates, keyframe the x. Let's say we go forward by 45 frames. Move this over here, and then keyframe again. If I go and play it, you see, that's what we have. So let's see how we can actually translate this information so that the yellow lines or the yellow polygons here on the vertex map stick out on the plane. Because currently this vertex map is applied, but it doesn't actually do anything. We don't actually use it anywhere. So let's go and see how we can do this. For that, I'm going to use an effector that we normally use for more graph objects. So I'm going to go and add a plane effector here. Now the plane effector here is going to be affecting this plane. So for that, I need to make the plane effector the child of the plane object. I don't actually need to have this linear field inside the plane. This could be anywhere. So let me just take this out. And I'm going to go to the plane effector, drop this inside the plane, and then on the plane effector, if I go to the deformer tab here, it's off by default, which means that this won't affect a standard plane. I can tell it to affect the entire object, the points, or the polygons on the object. Right now, they'll do exactly the same thing. But we'll be limiting this movement only to be affected by the vertex map. So I'm going to go to the points here, because that's what I want to push around. And then I'll go to parameter. I don't actually want them to be pushed up that way, so not y, I'm going to set this to 0. But I want them to come closer to us, so that's going to be z. Let's say maybe by minus 25 centimeters. And I also want to limit this to be where the vertex map is. So I'm going to go to the fields here. I can drag and drop this vertex map in here. And now this is the vertex map that's being used to affect the deformation on this object. If I go back to the beginning, let me zoom in a bit. I'll also go and press NA so I get rid of those lines. And as I play this now, you see the transition takes place from one to the next. This is very rough, and we'll fix that as well in a second. But this is the essence of what we'll be creating. So as the vertex map changes, you see the logo or the deformation changes as well. To make this smoother, let's first go and select the vertex map. I'm going to need to make the edges here smoother as well. So let me stop this. So for that, I'm going to select the splines, the new one and the old one. I'll, let's say, increase the distance from 7 to 10. So that will soften things a little bit. But this still won't be enough. If I click outside, I can see the deformation is still quite rough. I can select the plane and then press US to subdivide it. This kind of works, it improves the result, but it will create an unnecessary number of polygons on the object. An alternative would be to use a smoothing deformer. Let me just go and press Command Z to undo that. I can go and create a deformer here, the smoothing deformer. Drop this inside the plane object after the plane effector here. And now this gets smoothed out as well. You see that looks very nice. If I go back, play, we now go from this to that. Let me actually get rid of these grids as well. So I'm going to go to filter. In fact, I'm going to get rid of everything. I'm going to go and select geometry only. So I just see the plane here. To make things a little more organic when you use fields, you can actually make use of something called the delay layer. So if I select the vertex map here, I can go and add the delay layer here. And this is very similar to the delay effector that you normally have with MoGraph, this one here. What this does is either smooths out the transition going from one shape to another, or it creates a spring effect. Let me go back to the beginning. I'll use the default smooth. You can see what this does. You see the morph effect here is a little more subtle. If I go back again, maybe increase the effect strength. Play again. You see the transition takes its time, so it's more like a morphing shape. If I go back, the second option is the spring option, and this will actually create a recoil effect. If I select spring, go back, and play. This is what's happening here, but the effect strength is a bit too much. That's why we keep seeing the original shape again and again. So I'll lower down the effect strength. Play again. That's looking more like it. Let's see what this actually looks like on the plane. If I deselect this, I can see the deformation. Go back and play again. That's looking good, but this recoil effect where the wave comes in and shows us the original logo again, I don't quite like that very much. So I'm going to go to the vertex map. Select delay, lower the effect strength even more, let's say there, then go back to the beginning, deselect the map, and then play again. Now I'm not a big fan of this spring effect, so I'll actually go and set this back to smooth, and I'll increase the smoothing amount. Go back and play again. I think this does look better. Yeah, definitely like this better. So let me go and create a material. I'll apply this to the plane. Now I want to control the color of the deformation based on how high the segments go out. So the vertex map will actually drive the color of the material as well. So for that, I'm going to open up the material, go to color, I'll go to texture, I'll add the colorizer texture to this. And the colorizer texture is used to convert or translate one color data to another. I'll go and click on this. I'm going to control this colorizer texture with another texture of, if I go to effects, a vertex map. I'll then select the vertex map option and drop my vertex map in here. And now if I go back a level, this vertex map, this one, is driving the color, where black is the red side of the vertex map and white is the yellow side of the vertex map. If I go to the side, if I just select the vertex map here, you can see wherever we had yellow is now translated into white, and anywhere that was red is now black. But I can go and change those colors, of course. Let's say, for example, I want the base to be white. Let me just click outside. And then the parts that stick out to be, say, green. Like that. I don't actually think I made this first one white. Let me just go and double click. Yep, this was slightly off. I'm going to desaturate this all the way. Hit OK. And now you have a transition going from flat, white, to green. You can add more colors, of course. If you wanted to have another color, say, in between, I can add one more stop here. Double click. Say, make that one red. And now you have this red as well. If I go back to the beginning, play again. And that's what we have. Of course, we can make this look prettier if you add some reflections to this. Let's say if I go to reflectance, add, say we add a backbone to it. The whole thing is reflective now. I can maybe also go and add a Fresnel to it. Let's say we make this a dielectric reflection. So now there's more reflection depending on the angle of view, like that. If I go back to the beginning, center this, and now we go from the old logo to the new one. And as a final touch, I'll go and add some jiggle to this. Let me just come out of this. I'll select the plane, hold down Shift and create the jiggle as well, so that the jiggle gets added as a child of the plane. But I first need to deform it with the plane effector, then jiggle it, like that. And then after that's been done, it will be smoother as well. So if I go back now and play again, that's what I'm getting. And in fact, I'm going to make this even jigglier. So if I select jiggle, go to strength, increase this, let's say to 200% or so. If I go back again, play. Maybe even more actually. So I'm going to go and up this to say 350. And then go back and play once more. That's much nicer, much more of a wavy effect, which is what I'm after. Finally, I actually want to use the colors from Illustrator as well, so that the logo colors are similar. So if I open up this material, go to the color channel, open up the colorizer, I'm going to make the background black. Like that. I'll then switch back to Illustrator. Use this color as my base. So I'm going to select the red, double click, get the eyedropper, click on this color here. Okay, that one. And then this blue here as my last color. So I'll double click here, get the eyedropper, and then click on that blue. Okay, that one. I can now go and switch over to Cinema. And now that's what we have if I go back. The base itself here is going to be black. The things that are close to it will be green. And then the things that stick out the most will be blue. This is what we have. Now, I know I said finally quite a few times already, but I promise this is the very last time. If you want to make the background disappear, this black to go away, so you're only left with the logo itself, you could actually use an alpha channel for this. And finally, I'm going to show you this as well. Let me go and turn on the alpha channel first and add the same vertex map as your texture. And then if I open up the vertex map here, drop my texture in here, that will get rid of the background here, leaving you with just the logo. And of course, if you wanted these edges to be smoother, you can go back a level and then turn off the soft option here so you can control this manually. And now with the value of the delta here, you can control how soft those edges are. So the further left you go, the sharper the edges. The further right you go, closer to white, the softer the edges. So somewhere maybe here is looking good. And that's it. That's how you morph one spline into another one by using vertex maps together with fields and deformers in Cinema. Before you go, if you want to enter our weekly prize draw, where you could win a free training course that's fully live and interactive and worth over $1,000, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications. That's all you have to do. Thanks again for watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one.